Hello, Jules Good from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network here. The IAC is I back and as awful as ever. So we're going to dive into what that means for autism research, autistic people, and the autistic self-advocacy movement. For a full plain language explainer of this issue and how you can take action, click the link in the description. Let's start with the basics.
What? When, where, and why do I delight in? What do
IAC, or IACC, stands for Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee. We call them the IAC for short. The IAC is a group of people chosen by the government that helps decide what autism research the government will pay for. The US government sets aside some money for autism research. The IAC helps the US government decide how to spend that money. It meets a few times each year to look at existing autism research and propose new autism research. They ask researchers to focus on certain kinds of autism research projects, and they ask the government to pay for certain kinds of autism research projects. We're going to talk more about the specific research the current IAC is pushing for right now later in this video. The type of research the IAC advocates for depends on who the members of the IAC are at any given time. So who's on the IAC right now? The IAC has 21 members. Some members are federal members who work for federal agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Health and Human Services. The other members are called public members, which are people who are not coming to IAC meetings as representatives of a federal government agency. Public members are self-advocates, parents of autistic people, researchers, healthcare providers, and other people in the autism world. You can check out the full list of members at the link in the description. Members of the IAC are appointed by the Department of Health and Human Services, which is currently led by everyone's favorite vaccine hater and brainworm mech suit, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So it only follows that the current IAC roster is a real who's who of conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, and other people who should not be allowed within 500 yards of scientific research. Crucially, there are only 3 self-advocate public members of the IAC right now, and they are all white. In fact, every current public IAC member is white. This is a massive problem. Autistic people of color face different problems than white autistic people. And when they face the same problems as white autistic people, they are usually even harder to deal with. It is important for the IAC to listen to autistic people of color and people of color who support autistic people. If you want to learn more about advocacy led by autistic people of color, check out the Autistic People of Color Fund, linked in the description.
what? When, where, and why do I delight in? What do
Now that we know who we're dealing with, let's talk about what the IAC is up to. Spoiler alert, it's not good. Every few years, the IAC has to come up with a strategic plan. The strategic plan lays out what the IAC cares about when it comes to autism research and what kinds of autism research they want the government to spend money on. The federal government set aside $306 million to spend on autism research each year through the Autism Cares Act, and the IAC is asking for an additional $357 million, which means the final strategic plan will play a massive role in how autism research takes shape in the US. The IAC released their 2026 to 2028 strategic plan working draft on July 20th. Their next meeting is on August 27th, which we're going to talk about more later, and it's going to focus mostly on this draft. It's a 336-page document jam-packed with deeply troubling ideas. We don't have time to pick apart every issue in the plan, but here are the things we're most concerned about. Policies about institutions. In a disability context, institutions are places where only disabled people live. Disabled people in institutions don't get to make choices about lots of everyday things: what and when they eat, when they can go outside, who can come visit, and much more. People in institutions are often isolated from community, which makes them more likely to be abused. There is a long and documented history of this abuse, which was one of the main things that led to the Olmsted Supreme Court decision, which ruled that the Americans with Disabilities Act says disabled people have the right to live and get services in our communities instead of being locked away. This also led to increased government funding and regulation around services at home that has allowed more disabled people to get care in the setting of our choice. Most of the services disabled people get at home, funded by the government, are called Home and Community-Based Services, or HCBS for short. But support at home is far from perfect. For one thing, the lack of affordable housing nationwide means that the home part of support at home is very difficult for many disabled people to get. A lot of autistic adults live with their parents or other family because they struggle to find accessible employment or other ways of reaching financial independence. There is a very real concern amongst parents and other older caregivers of younger disabled people that after they die, the disabled person they care for will have no housing options. The IAC strategic plan draft draws attention to this issue. But instead of advocating for more funding for HCBS or services that would help autistic people become financially independent, or any other solution that prioritizes autonomy of autistic people, the IAC is trying to make it easier for autistic people to be institutionalized. Some background info. In order to get HCBS funding, programs that provide care and services to disabled people outside of institutions have to follow certain rules. The rules make sure that these programs are not just institutions in disguise. You can learn more about these rules on our webpage called HCBS Settings Rule Resources, linked in the description. Many of these resources are available in plain language and easy read formats. The IAC wants the government to change the rules about what counts as HCBS. They want the government to say that some places where only disabled people live and where we don't have control over our lives can be HCBS settings. That means that places that are institutions in disguise would be able to get HCBS funding, and that real HCBS programs would be competing with institutions for that funding. If that happens, many more disabled people might have to live in institutions. POV. I'm about to explain some hard policy stuff, but it's okay because we're also watching public domain footage of Yosemite National Park. This recommendation is really bad on its own, but it's even worse in the context of what the federal government just did. In June of this year, the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel released something called a slip opinion about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Olmstead case, and our right to live in the community. This office basically acts like the lawyers for the government. They tell other members of the government what they should think the law says and how to follow the law. The office isn't a court. The people who make these opinions are lawyers for the government, not judges. They can't actually change the law on their own, but they do get to tell the rest of the executive branch what they should think. The June slip opinion represents a huge change to how the federal government thinks about disabled people's rights to independent living by challenging the ruling in the Olmstead case. The Olmstead case made it clear that the law established something called the integration mandate. The integration mandate says that programs that get money from the federal government have to provide care to disabled people in the most integrated setting possible. That means that if someone wants to get care at home instead of in an institution, they have to be allowed to, unless it can be proven that there is no way to provide the care they need at home. But now, the federal government is saying that they think everyone else got Olmstead wrong. They think it was never meant to give those rights to, quote, mentally disabled individuals, which can include autistic people, people with other developmental disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities, and people with significant mental health disabilities. That effectively means that the federal government will stop enforcing the law to protect our rights to live in the community. They might try to change the law by making new regulations that don't protect us. They may even argue for the courts to overrule Olmstead and take away our rights. If the current IAC gets their way, many disabled people who do not want to live in institutions, which is most of us, could get a double whammy. The government would be allowed to give HCBS money to institutions in disguise that shouldn't receive it, and there would be no legal incentive for states to keep disabled people out of institutions. The IAC is trying to tout their idea as a reasonable response to the affordable housing crisis, saying that the government shouldn't call something an institution just because it looks and functions as an institution does, and that the only way to provide housing to disabled people is to loosen restrictions on what counts as independent living. It's sort of like if a restaurant labeled their menu items as dairy-free because they decided that milk shouldn't count as dairy anymore. Changing the label does not change the outcomes, which in this case are far worse than needing to pop some lactades. Using different words for the same bad thing because you know the word you want to use is naughty does not mean you stopped advocating for the bad thing. Disabled people, and particularly people with IDD, are more likely to be abused, neglected, and killed in institutional settings. Word count-wise, this is a small part of the strategic plan, but it's a massive issue. We cannot let the IAC put millions of dollars in autism research money into building and funding more institutions. Preventing and curing autism. The other thing ASAN is deeply concerned about in the IAC strategic plan draft is its huge focus on figuring out what causes autism and stopping autism from happening. Before we dive in, let me just say this. Autistic people should be allowed to exist. This should not be a radical statement. We are not a problem waiting to be fixed. We are human beings with complex lives. Yes, being autistic can be hard. It can be especially hard if you're an autistic person with unmet support needs and overlapping disabilities, or if you're an autistic person who also experiences racism, transphobia, and other forms of hate. The goal of the autistic self-advocacy movement is not to say that being autistic is easy. It is not to say that autistic people don't need help. The goal of the autistic self-advocacy movement is to make sure that all autistic people can get the support we need on our terms. And there are so many ways we could make significant progress toward that goal through research, policy change, and changes to the ways people think and talk about autism. But instead of doing literally any of that, the IAC is hell-bent on figuring out what causes autism so they can prevent people from being born with autism and cure those of us who are already suffering from autism. They want to invest heavily in research areas that won't do a darn thing for autistic people living in the world today. The IAC is careful to say several times in the strategic plan draft that they are focused on functional improvement, which should, quote, never be characterized as a cure. But functional improvement, as the IAC defines it, just translates to acting less autistic. Again, using different words for the same bad thing because you know the word you want to use is naughty does not mean you stopped advocating for the bad thing. And unfortunately, funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into research about cure and causation means that money won't be put into research about things that could actually help autistic people live our best lives. Which brings us to the next issue with the IAC strategic plan draft. Moving money around. The IAC says that their strategic plan would not take any money away from any areas of autism research, but it also says that research money can be creatively moved around to functionally change what research is happening under the same label. Say it with me one more time. Using different words for the same bad thing because you know the word you want to use is naughty does not mean you stopped advocating for the bad thing. For example, let's say that one defined area of autism research is about services. For a long time, we have understood and used the word services to mean help and care that people can get in the community. But the IAC could decide to spend less money on research about services in the community and more money on research about services that people get in institutions. They can still say that they technically didn't take any money away from research on services, but in reality, the money's not being spent on the right thing. It's being spent on researching institutions. The freedom to do this creative labeling means that the IAC would be able to dupe the community into thinking they are investing in priorities we all agree on while they put money into very unpopular and harmful practices instead. Okay, so you might be thinking, wow, this all sounds really bad. Is there anything we can do about it? Luckily, yes, there is. Let's talk about the when and where.
What, when, where, and why do I delight in? What do
The IAC meeting is on August 27th, and it's going to talk about the strategic plan draft. They will also be talking about the public comments they get sent about the strategic plan draft. That's where you come in. Public comments are a way for everyday people to let the government know what we think about a rule or law. You don't have to be an expert on something to send a public comment about it. From everything we've said so far, you can probably tell that the IAC hasn't been listening to many autistic people. If you're autistic, the IAC needs to hear from you. If you have autistic people in your life and you actually listen to them about what they think is important, the IAC needs to hear from you. We have a full plain language guide about how to submit public comments to the IAC on our iAction page. It takes you step by step through understanding what the IAC does, helpful things to say in your comments, and how to send your comments to the IAC. We even have information about how to submit your comment while protecting your online privacy. Follow the link in the description to read this guide. Public comments are due on August 20th. Set a calendar reminder, tell your friends, tell your enemies as long as they have good autism takes, and send in those comments by August 20th.
what, when, where, and why do I delight in? What do
Why is it so important for people to submit public comments to the IAC about their strategic plan draft? The IAC is supposed to ask people what the strategic plan should focus on before writing it. But they didn't do that. Instead, they made a strategic plan and now they're asking for people to comment on it after the fact. Autistic people got left out when the IAC wrote their strategic plan. Like we said, the IAC only has 3 autistic public members and none of them are autistic people of color. The IAC wrote their strategic plan without listening to autistic people on purpose, because the IAC doesn't want to hear from autistic people because they know that most autistic people don't agree with almost anything they're trying to do. The way the IAC is acting is part of a larger pattern. The IAC is one very small part of the government. And if you haven't noticed, many parts of the government treat disabled people and people of color like disabled people and people of color get left out of important government decisions. These decisions make it easier to treat people unfairly, and leaving us out of the process of making those decisions makes it even easier. So that's why it's so important to send in comments to the IAC. We don't want any part of this to be easy for them. The IAC has to read people's comments and think about those comments. They might not want to hear from us, but if enough of us send comments and sound the alarm on the horrible things the IAC is trying to do, they won't be able to keep ignoring us. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click on the link in the description for our full plain language guide on how to submit comments to the IAC. Nothing about us without us.